Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Lion's Den. This is the Weekly Roar. Today, we're going to continue the recap of our next two leadership lessons. During this leadership lessons mini-series, I'm sharing the recap of two lessons learned each week from my last series, Lessons Learned in Leadership. Since that series started well over 6 months ago, I wanted to go back over those lessons in a Reader's Digest fashion and bring back the highlights for you to keep those lessons fresh in your mind. So this week, we're rewinding the clock again and going back to December 2020 and January 2021, and we're talking about lessons 13 and 14. Now, before we jump into that, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Greg Storch. I'm the owner of Lion Enterprise, host of the Weekly Roar, and the founder of a worldwide bartered coaching program called The Helping Hand. I'm a certified professional leadership coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. And as a friendly reminder, you can find all of my video resources on my website at lion-enterprise.com. Just look for the Lion's Pride Library and you can check them all out. Okay, let's get started with the recap of Lesson 13, The Secret to Time Management. You know, our ability to maximize our time is essential to our productivity and effectiveness. We're using planners and schedulers and calendars all under this false perception that it gives us the ability to manage time. But do we really have the ability to manage time? Everybody's day is like an identical suitcase. It's the same dimension for all of us. Yet, some people can pack more into their suitcase than others. The thing that makes them different is that they know what to pack in their suitcase. While we all have the same amount of hours in the day, not everyone gets the same out of it. Time can't be managed or controlled. No matter what we do, it's going to tick on by whether we do something or not. We can't save unused minutes and bank them to use on another day. The counter resets to 0 every day and starts another 24-hour countdown. Stephen Covey nailed it when he said that time management is really a misnomer. The challenge isn't to manage time, but to manage ourselves. The key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. I love that. The bottom line up front, the secret I shared that day in the Lion's Den, was that the secret to time management isn't just that we can't manage time. If we want to make the most of the hours we have, if we want to pack the most things we can into our suitcases, then we have to realize the things that are in our control. Successful people focus on the things they can control. And so that brings me straight to the big secret from that lesson learned in leadership. The secret to time management is not managing time, but managing ourselves. Nothing separates successful people from the unsuccessful ones more than how they use their time, how good they become at packing their suitcase. And getting good at packing that suitcase comes from knowing what to pack. That's how you maximize the space in the case. Now, when it comes to success and leadership, the thing that separates successful leaders from the unsuccessful ones is that the successful leader knows where their time goes and they account for every minute of their 24 hours. So during that weekly roar back in December, I shared insights on what it looks like when people can't properly manage themselves, because having knowledge of those things is helpful in identifying potential areas where we may need to get stronger if we want to better manage ourselves. If you think about it, time really is our truest currency. Whatever we purchase, ultimately, it's being paid for by trading our time. Now, here's the example I used that day. Say I want to purchase a $50,000 car. I have to trade my time to earn that money. If it takes me a year of my time to earn $50,000, then that car cost me a year of my time. Now, after stating my case that we don't manage time, we manage ourselves, I shared 3 things people are guilty of doing who can't manage themselves very well. Now, that first one was that people who manage themselves poorly are guilty of letting others spend their currency. We have to control our spending, and we can't allow others to determine how we're going to spend the only real currency we have, and that's our time. When people allow others to determine how they spend their time, they become ineffective, even though they look really busy. The secret to success with this one was to get intentional with the things you spend time on. That allows us to stay focused on the things we do well and to spend our limited time there instead of somewhere else. If you want to be more effective in life and in leadership, then you must get good at spending your own currency instead of letting others spend it for you. Here was the pulse check that I shared for this one. Simply reflect on where you spend your time. If more of your time is being spent to meet someone else's expectations for you, then you need to do a better job at managing yourself. Now, I continued by sharing the second thing that people who poorly manage themselves are guilty of, and that was spending their currency on the wrong things. I prompted others that day to ask if they're spending their time on the wrong things. And if so, what are the right things? Well, my answer to that was the right thing is anything that directly contributes to moving you in the direction of your desired destination. I then shared 2 factors that helped identify whether something was worthy of their time and attention. Those 2 criteria were importance and urgency. Now, I said that when ranking things by importance, they had to have the ability to categorize those things into buckets. The critical items in one bucket, the important items in another, and the marginal things in a third bucket. I urged others that day to take that bucket of critical items and place a timeline on them for getting them done, whether it was weekly, monthly, quarterly, or even annually. That little exercise was designed to help others better identify those things that weren't as important or needed to be accomplished as quickly as the other things. Those who know what needs to get packed get the most into the case. In other words, those who know which tasks must be accomplished in the time that they have available will best utilize the limited time they have. Then that brought me to the third thing that people who poorly manage themselves are guilty of doing, and that was spending their currency without the proper guidance from the right people. One of the most important things we can do, whether it's in our personal lives or our professional lives, is seek the help of those who have gone before us. If I want to make the most out of my investments, I speak with a money manager. If I want to make the most out of my time at the gym, I speak with a personal trainer. If I want to dial in my eating habits, I speak with a nutritionist. Here's the thing. If you want to make the most of your time, you have to make the most of yourself. You can do that by finding someone to help you improve your abilities. When others try to accomplish things without the proper coaching or mentoring, they end up reducing their potential. So, those were the three things that people are guilty of doing when they're poor managers of their own time. First, they allow others to spend their currency, and, you know, in other words, they give others way too much control over their time, leaving little control to manage it themselves. That devalues their uniqueness. Second, they spend their currency on the wrong things. That's a priority issue, and they aren't prioritizing their tasks appropriately. That just makes them ineffective. And then that third thing was that they try to do things without getting help from those who have gone before them. When we try to figure it out on our own without coaching or mentoring, we just end up lowering the bar on our potential. Now, the thing about this 13th lesson learned in leadership was that there really is an art to managing our lives, and that's exactly how we make the most out of the time we have. Understanding that the best way to manage the time we have is to manage our lives better. That's the thing we can control. Life management starts with an awareness of time and of the choices that we should make in order to use that currency wisely. So there it is, a reminder of the secret to time management. The only true way to manage the time we have is to really manage our lives so we're spending that currency in the right places, in the right way, on the right things. Now, this brings me to the recap of one of my favorites of all the lessons learned in leadership, and I called that one The Power of Personal Growth. And it's how we kicked off the new year in January of 2021. Now, you may remember this one. It was the lesson where I shared my own story about listening to an audiobook and how that set me on my own path of personal growth. The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth by John C. Maxwell introduced me to the concept of a personal growth plan. It was on that day that I heard those words from John himself that said, people don't automatically grow. They have to be intentional about it. What I'd learned since that day is that we don't reach our potential on accident. And what matters most is what we do daily. That's the day I became intentional in my actions to develop my leadership potential by learning all I could about leadership. The other thing I learned was that I'm still learning, and that will never end. Now, because I have a firsthand experience with the power of taking intentional actions in my personal growth, I spent time in the lion's den that day sharing suggestions with others on how they could become more intentional about learning and growing in both life and leadership. The first suggestion I shared with others last January was to invest in themselves. By then, I had said it a million times. It all begins with us first. I made that suggestion because sometimes leaders want to focus on developing the business, but I believe that the growth of the business really depends on the growth of the people in the business, and their growth depends on the growth of the leader. If a leader wants to grow their business, they should grow themselves first. Sounded simple enough, but the reality was that leaders struggle putting themselves first. They feel selfish, and good leaders always put others before themselves. I explained that it was just like that oxygen mask that drops down on the planes when they lose altitude. We have to put our masks on first before we can help others put their masks on. It's not because we're selfish, It's because we have to be able to do it for ourselves before we can be in a position to help others. Harry Truman even said, "You can't lead others until you first lead yourself." It's true. If we don't take care of ourselves as leaders, we can't help our people. Now, the second suggestion I shared was to urge others to become lifelong learners. And that was important because growth is a never ending effort. The reason I made that suggestion was because some leaders can have a tendency to pull back and coast once they've reached a goal or a certain position in the organization. But as I said that day, leaders are learners and learning just never ends. The habit of continuing, that's what helps good leaders to continue moving forward, even when they've reached certain levels. So, for this suggestion, I used a few examples of successful sports legends like Tiger Woods and Serena Williams. They didn't stop learning once they reached the top of their sports. They continued to learn, and that's how they remained at the top. If you want to lead, you have to learn. And if you want to keep leading, you have to keep learning. Once you stop learning, you forfeit the ability to not only add value to yourself, but add value to others as well. Now, the third and final suggestion I made that day was for leaders to create an environment that encourages the growth of those they lead. While my first two suggestions were inward focused, that third one shifted to a more outward focus because once a leader has himself on track, then they'll be in a position to focus on their followers. The sad fact is that the average person wants to keep others from rising above average. Now, I warned leaders that day that if they ever see those types of people, or if they personally know them, then they have a big decision to make. Distancing themselves from the people who rather keep managing old problems instead of trying to find new solutions is critical to making my third suggestion viable. To make things easier, I suggested to identify places where growth is valued and prioritized. Just like a plant, we can't grow without being in the right environment. I wrapped up this last suggestion by sharing the story of a new hire at my wife's center. They have live plants around the center, and I shared that one of the employees was responsible for maintaining those plants. Well, one of the new employees who wasn't known for having a green thumb noticed that one of their newest plant that was purchased wasn't doing so well. The leaves were turning brown and the plant just looked droopy. They were actually about to toss that plant into the trash when another employee took that plant and completely repotted it. You see, the pot had become too small, the soil too dry, and it wasn't placed in the right amount of sunlight. Once the environment was changed to a larger pot, nutrient-rich soil, and the right amounts of sunlight, the plant began to thrive and grow. You see, environment matters. So if your organization suffers from high attrition and finds it hard to attract the right employees, look no further than the type of environment the leaders have created. If the environment isn't one that encourages others to grow, they'll go somewhere else to do it. Create an environment that encourages growth. Your people will stay longer as they experience that growth, and it will also help attract those who foster a growth mindset. It's a win-win on both ends. So those were the three suggestions I made to leaders if they wanted to become more intentional in their growth. To invest in themselves first. They can't give what they don't have, so this is the best place to get started. to become a continual learner, to get curious and be intentional about their growth, and to create environments that are conducive to the growth of others and distance themselves from those who have no desire to learn and grow. Keep this one thing in mind. Other people's attitudes and actions can rub off on us. They do rub off on us. So it's important to pay attention to the people you surround yourself with. If you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. Being around people who are better than we are can make us stretch and improve ourselves. If you're trying to really commit to becoming a continual learner, or you're trying to create an environment of growth in your own organization, the secret to your success will be found in the people who surround you. All right, everybody, that does it for this week's recap, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you want to keep running to the roar, then join me next week as I continue these micro lessons in review and recap the 15th and 16th lessons learned in leadership. All you have to do is just come on back to the Lion's Den next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for supporting me and watching the Weekly Roar today. I really appreciate you coming back week after week. Now, until we meet again, remember, be powerful, but stay poised just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.